You're expecting people to be rational.
Right. Well, maybe that's where I'm falling down.
This is where this all falls down.
That's right.
So what type of leadership do we need because of the breadth of the crises that we have?
I would articulate it as being empathetic leadership that's willing to look out collectively at the impact of individual decision making. Obviously, for an issue like climate change, we need leaders to be able to look beyond their geographic boundaries, beyond just the perceived impact on their individual constituencies, and think more broadly about the much wider societal impact of lack of action on climate change. And yes, so I would put that under the banner of empathetic leadership. But there are many ways you could cut it. You could say we need fewer isolationists. We need more collectivists. Either way, it's that approach that is so important. We also need consensus builders, because obviously this challenge is not on a 3-year or 4-year electoral cycle. And so, when we think about the way that we tend to focus as politicians, which is how can I get my domestic constituency to vote for me in the next electoral cycle,
which is understandable.
Understandable, absolutely understandable. And often, of course, you're in really fraught battles with your opponents, where there's no incentive to build consensus. But this is an issue where we need it. We need more reaching across the aisle. One of the ways I used to refer to it in New Zealand, which is only really probably makes sense domestically, is to call it our nuclear-free moment. And it's because in New Zealand's psyche is a period in the 1980s where we looked around the world at the debate on nuclear testing and said, it is not okay to test a device like this in our region.
Yeah.
Because you might not be testing it, right on our back door, but the Pacific is our back door.
Yes.
So this matters to us. And we took that regional view and we took a stand to the point we declared ourselves nuclear free, and we hold it to this day. It lost us some important alliances at the time, with the United States in particular. But it was a moment where we stood up. And so that's how I see climate for New Zealand. It is our nuclear free moment where we have a choice to take a stand.
So it's 10 years since Paris.
Yes.
And the underlying logic in Paris was that if we put in place these long-term goals with these national plans, then in time, the economics will shift and the politics will follow the economics. And if you look back now, after 10 years, the economics has gone further and faster than we could have imagined.
Totally.
Wind and solar, cheapest form of new power around the world, more jobs.
Totally.
The politics has gone in the opposite direction. Why
Indeed.
is that?
Because politicians are, unfortunately, have always had options in front of them that to secure electoral victory, they can choose one of two options: to amplify a message of hope and change, or to amplify messages of fear and blame. And fear and blame have been around as political tools for decades. And when you think about it, are a lot easier than hope and change because there's less of a delivery message for it. There's more of a, rally around blaming this other group, thereby removing any responsibility I might have as a politician to affect the change that is needed. And particularly when you're dealing with the complexity of financial insecurity, which I think is a significant issue in the post-COVID economies. So it's an easy trick and playbook for a politician, and it just so happens we're seeing a lot of it.
Easier to understand for people.
Easier to understand.
Easier to communicate.
Because of course, what we're asking for is a transition away from often traditional forms of energy generation, manufacturing, transportation. It is a significant change, an economic shift. It's very easy to position it as a threat to jobs and livelihoods.
So do you think that because if the economics truly has shifted, and all the evidence is that it has,
absolutely,
and that'll be bumpy, transitions are messy, there'll be winners and losers, but in the end, do you think that the politics will align with the new economics? Or do you...
You better say yes.
Is it a bug or is it a feature of our new post-truth landscape? Is it just a transitional issue? Or do we need to be more deliberate about connecting the economics with the new?
I see the politics as also a passing moment in time. That is how I see it. I think we're in a particular cycle, but I think people will shift before necessarily politics will. And look, in Western liberal democracies, that's usually how it tracks. But I think it's a mistake for us to believe that just because we have this particular form of leadership, that is the will of the people currently. And it's a natural assumption to make that surely it is the will of people. These are democracies electing these leaders. But I don't believe that necessarily every single person who has voted that way is always voting for every single piece of the ideology that comes with it.
It actually is a mystery. So there's at least one recent survey that says that 89% of global population wants their governments, whether it's national or subnational, to move faster. But they don't vote that way, Jacinda.
So this is where it's really interesting. And I draw on that UNDP survey all the time because it's one of many pieces of example and data that shows us that actually just because we have these particular leaders in doesn't mean it's necessarily reflecting where people are at. And that's just because...
But it also doesn't reflect where they're voting.
Indeed. And
how they're voting.
And that is, of course, I think we sometimes just make a natural assumption that, when people vote, it is a
reflection of their brain.
But it's, at the time, if you drill down into it, sometimes people will vote just because they feel like the system is broken and not working for them. Mm-hmm. So they vote for someone that feels outside of the system.
Right.
And on climate, probably people do think the system's a bit broken. It hasn't delivered. So
100%.
We can't necessarily make an assumption about every outcome from an election. And the other is that sometimes people might vote for one particular policy, often one that benefits them financially, understandably, in these times. But it's not necessarily the case that they are always voting ideologically in the way that we assume. So it is complex, but I do think it will, to your point, I do think it will shift. Because if people are sold a particular narrative about, I will make your life better, and then their life isn't better, they search around for the alternative. What we need is for them not to turn away from democratic institutions when they do.
Yeah. So if you look now and we believe the premise that people want this, it's economically beneficial, and yet we're here at COP and leaders aren't delivering on it.
Yes. And you're expecting people to be rational.
Right. Well, maybe that's where I'm falling down.
This is where this all falls down.
That's right. Well, that's the question. Because if you speak to someone who's in those positions, they will say, well, that's all very well, but you don't know what it's like. There are all these competing priorities. But you have been in those positions, and you led, and you made the decisions.
Yes.
Are you disappointed when you come here? I mean, you must weep when you look around at the quality of leadership we have on the world stage.
I mean, look, you're right. When you're in the position, you can see how it happens. You can see what's led that person to that decision-making point. It doesn't make you feel any better about it.
Right.
It just means you understand the context and then feel depressed. But I think one of the challenges that, and we had some really tough decisions, but what always stuck with me was I was a child of the 80s, and in New Zealand we went through a very bumpy economic transition where New Zealand went from being one of the most regulated economies in the world to one of the most open, what felt like overnight. It was very dramatic, and a lot of jobs were lost and a lot of harm was done, and we're probably still feeling the social consequences of it now. And the way that played out in my thinking was, I do not want to preside over decision making which postpones inevitable decisions that lead to an inevitable economic shock. And so taking long-term decisions around, for instance, transitioning away from fossil fuels, I saw as that was my version of trying to prepare and lay the groundwork for something that otherwise might hit hard. So that was why we took...
And something that is going to come anyway, so you might as well accelerate it.
And it did not sit well with me, the idea of just for my political expedience, postponing it for someone else.
Yeah.
And so it also is the best opportunity to make tough decisions as if you put them on a pathway that is less jarring. And so that's why we decided that we would ban the issuing of future offshore oil and gas permits. It was, in our minds, the best way to signal the transition we needed to make. If you put out the permitting for exploration, that's another 10, 20 years of exploration in those offshore basins of New Zealand. So that was our way of saying to the industry, we have to exit. We're signalling that now. Now work with us on a hydrogen roadmap for that energy hub of New Zealand.
And what was the reaction?
Yeah, actually, look, in the area itself, it was tough. because that was an industry, significant economic part of the economy of the Taranaki region. But we didn't remove anything overnight, obviously. Obviously, everything that was existing was still operating. It was a way of saying, we're going to work with you, though, for an alternative plan. So over time, it got better because they saw us then investing in the region for that alternative economy.
Over time during your term,
yes,
or post your term?
During my term.
Because so often these really radical changes need to be started and then have the patience and the wisdom to see they will supersede your term.
Well, I'll finish this story because, obviously, I don't always put the end part on because it doesn't always feel hopeful. I was in for 5 years, and then when I left, the new government reversed the ban.
Here we are.
But a signal was sent.
A signal was sent.
And that signal was, you can be assured that if a Labour government is returned, we will make that change again.
And who's going to invest in that context?
And so now the industry has heard that message. And so I always say to the private sector, if you're looking for the certainty, then just lift the bar.
Yeah.
Lift the bar, and that's where you'll find it.
What are the biggest opportunities for leadership that those individuals who hold the job that you used to hold?
From my, with my old hat on, I think what I was always mindful of is, it's not enough to come out and amplify the overarching goals unless you're demonstrating you're walking the talk at home. And so that's, I think, the leadership we need. It's both coming out and encouraging those around you, but demonstrating what you're doing domestically as well. Because, we all look to each other. We look for examples. How is Denmark dealing with its agriculture? What's the Netherlands up to? We canvass around. And when I came in, there was a mantra of, well, New Zealand should be a fast follower. I didn't want to be a fast follower.
You want to be a fast leader.
Yeah, you want to be able to lead, because then there is some economic advantage, to being a first mover, to being the innovator, to creating the technology that others need.
Absolutely.
But we also do borrow from each other. So I think the leadership opportunity is not just to amplify the important messages. It's to walk the talk and start bringing to the table, those ideas, initiatives, and investments that are going to make a difference.
When you look at the nature of geopolitics today, which is different from the time when you were in office with President Trump and much less clarity of values-based leadership, it's always been challenging, but now it's a particularly difficult time. Do you wish you were still in post to provide a different model, or are you glad you're not there?
It's a good question. Well, of course, I was in
office.
Wait,
should we ask your family that?
Yeah. Well, of course, my husband never wanted me to leave, so he's probably a little bit of an outlier on that one. My mum certainly did. Trump was in when I was in, but you're absolutely right to say it's
different this time.
It's a different level again. Do I miss it? There are things I miss. There are things I miss.
Such as?
I do, if you believe in something really strongly, like, positions on certain wars or on climate change, then of course when you're a leader there is a natural platform there, and so there's an outlet for your care and concern that doesn't exist once you leave, and so I miss that, but I don't regret the decision. And so instead, my way of feeling useful is to try and just amplify the voices that are already there. The Pacific doesn't need anyone to speak on its behalf. It just needs people to listen. So if I can assist with that, that's enough for me.
Well, everyone has been listening to the Pacific since the ICJ decision made it. I mean, amazing.
And that was, youth had
so groundbreaking.
The voice of young people in that as well, as advocates for that and making that a reality, also huge.
Well, Jacinda, thank you so much for joining us here. Thank you for devoting this time to us.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much.